black smoke coming out of the building, just being hit by Israeli airstrike. Israel started to respond to thousands of rockets fired by the militant group Hamas since like 6:30 in the morning, with a surprise organized attack by, as Hamas said, by sea, land, and air. We have getting reports of Hamas militants infiltrated into the Israeli territories, captured, as they claim, one of Israeli military posts, and kidnapped some of the soldiers from this location. The latest figure from Palestinian Health Ministry official, he said about 25 people so far killed since the morning. Some of the Israeli airstrikes were targeting the border area where Hamas militants are believed to be infiltrated inside. Israel is trying to secure the big gap that Hamas cut in the fence and started the attack from there. People here in Gaza are starting to feel the war, and always people, civilians in both sides, are paying the price of this unstoppable conflict. People live 4 wars and few battles in between, but I don't think they have ever been in this worry since 17 years, because they believe that what Hamas has done today is significant escalation and will bring significant response from Israel, where 2.3 million people live in a very poor, tiny, highly populated area.
On that, Rushdie, we are seeing these airstrikes in Gaza right now, thousands of people in this very small, as you said, densely populated area. Is it possible for people to go to anywhere that feels more safe?
Well, in Gaza, there is no shelter system or even siren system or warning system. People since early in the morning stay indoors. Well, Saturday is a normal working day. By the time Hamas fired the rocket, but thousands of students were going to school, and some of them were stuck in the school. Quickly, Hamas announced that there is no school, no university. As I'm talking, I'm looking over the center. It's been deserted in the morning. Most of the shops are closed. Only few bakeries and some supermarkets, and we have seen people queuing to store any sort of food, because they believe this escalation is going to be mounting and is going to be long-time escalation.
Is it possible for you to say, Rushdie, as people prepare for what they know is this inevitable escalation by Israel, how they actually feel about the actions of Hamas today? How much support does Hamas have?
I was able to talk to a few people in the street just down the city center here. People have mixed feelings. While some people were cheering what Hamas has done, and they praised Hamas for getting back with dead soldiers or light soldiers, they didn't hide their worry that might bring a real tough Israeli response. We have seen Israel knocking down buildings in last wars, killing civilians, and people are worried about this. They have mixed feeling, a feeling that somebody is defending and somebody is punishing Israel for their aggression, as one of the young men told me in the street. But on the other hand, they have real worry about their family, about their safety, and about this latest escalation.
Rushdie, it seems now that so much of what is happening is in the hands of young, angry, militant men who have weapons, who have given up on any kind of peace process, certainly given up on the Palestinian Authority, and believe that this is the only way forward. Can you describe for us, when you speak to some of these people, what they tell you about the future, why they feel that this is the only action they can take?
Well, just like last week, there was a big military show in Gaza marking the anniversary of the creation of Islamic Jihad. I was there. They were talking openly about what they call the Great Battle. They didn't give any details about it, but they were talking about that they are preparing for years and years for this battle. This is the battle of liberating Palestine, the historical Palestine. I was a bit surprised when they were like confident about talking about this, and also people in Gaza were surprised to see Hamas for the first time in the last 17 years carry this organized planned big attack in the biggest military force in the Middle East, which is Israel. And as I said, people have no choice, as they said, after 17 years of tough blockade, bad economic situation, lack of jobs, lack of opportunity, the quality of life is really bad. So people, some of the people just justify what Hamas did by saying this is the last chance for them to improve their life conditions.
Rushdie, where does Hamas get its weapons from?
Well, some of the weapons are locally made, and some of the weapons are smuggled either by sea or by Egypt, Sinai. We remember, like back in 2013, when the regime in Egypt collapsed and we saw chaos in Sinai, Hamas managed to smuggle a lot of weapons from Libya into Gaza. Also, they have their own factories. They always say that we are developing this kind of rockets. One source told me last year that Hamas have got as much as 50,000 rockets and maybe more. As you know, Israel left Gaza in 2006, and Hamas captured this territory after a short fight with the BA, and they were in control of this. They dig tunnels, they managed to bring weapons, they managed to develop weapons, and they were always openly, even in their local media, social media, they were openly talking about a great battle and a battle to liberate Palestine. They were always talking about this.
Rushdie, thank you so much. And we will just stay with these pictures of the skyline in Gaza. You can see these retaliatory airstrikes that have been taking place. We wait to hear what damage has been done, whether there's been any injuries or loss of life from these in Gaza. But I can tell you, in terms of what is happening in Israel today, the health ministry saying now more than 540 Israelis have been injured in the Hamas attack. And we are also hearing 22 Israelis have been killed. So a day of fear right across the region for many people who will be seeking shelter and trying to stay safe. Let's join Neri Zilber, who is a journalist and analyst on Middle East politics based in Tel Aviv and an adjunct fellow of the Washington Institute. Thank you for joining us at what is a hugely worrying time, I'm sure. Can you give us your personal perspective, firstly, how you became aware that these attacks from Hamas were underway this morning?
I, like all the residents of Tel Aviv, at around 6:37 in the morning, was woken up by air raid rocket sirens over the city, which is in central Israel, not that close to the Gaza border in the Gaza border region. And yes, that was the first indication that something different was underway. But really, I and many other analysts and even Israeli officials already view this as a colossal intelligence and military failure. On par with what happened 50 years ago during the October 1973 war, and in many respects worse, because in 1973, it was both the Egyptian and Syrian militaries that launched a surprise attack on Yom Kippur against Israel. This was a surprise attack launched by one militant group, Hamas, that controls the Gaza Strip, on one front in southern Israel, against Israel on, again, a holiday morning. The holiday of Simchat Torah is being celebrated today. So really unprecedented, colossal intelligence failure. And by the way, the ongoing firefights in at least a dozen Israeli communities and military bases in southern Israel near the Gaza border region are still ongoing now some 9 hours after this all started.
Yeah, we are hearing that as well. And we are also, just as we speak to you, watching these live pictures of retaliatory action by Israel on the Gaza Strip at the moment, Neri. But what you're saying is that the intention here was not what was surprising, but the capabilities of Hamas.
No, actually, the capabilities were well known in terms of the Hamas special forces and even hang gliding units that know how to take to the air and land inside Israel proper, or even naval commando units. That was all known. And the intention, by the way, Israeli military intelligence, as of even a few days and a few weeks ago, assessed that Hamas, while there was an uptick in tensions and escalations and clashes on the border between Gaza and Israel in recent weeks, did not in and of itself want a major escalation, and nothing like the total war that was launched this morning by Hamas into Israel. So in terms of capabilities and even Hamas's reason for being, that in and of itself was not a surprise, but the intention was not believed to be there, as well as the actual capability to pull off an operation like this. It takes two sides to actually engage in a conflict like this, and the fact that the Israeli military and the Gaza division that's responsible for that area apparently completely both missed Hamas's assault, as well as apparently just crumbled in the face of this assault, is really the biggest surprise, and we're seeing the results of that ongoing right now in southern Israel.
So there'll be huge questions now about that intelligence failure and the response too. But as we look at what is happening, which is these attacks on the Gaza Strip, and you've mentioned the ongoing, of course, worry of the situation in southern Israel too, but it's because we're looking at these pictures of Gaza that I want to ask you what you think the IDF will do now. How big do you think the response will be?
My fear is that this will be a Gaza, Israel, Hamas, IDF campaign like we've never seen before. So Hamas took over the Gaza Strip in 2007, and as most of your viewers likely know, there have been constant and ongoing what they call here rounds of escalation and conflict since roughly around the time Hamas took over the Gaza Strip. What we're likely to see in the coming days, and I fear weeks, is on a scale, an order of magnitude like nothing before.
And Neri, what about the concerns? We're also hearing that this will widen, not just to the West Bank, but we are waiting for a response from Hezbollah and from Lebanon.
That's a major concern on the Israeli side, both the security and political echelon. Yes, Hezbollah from the north, from Lebanon, it's a major concern. They may just be biding their time until Israel commits further divisions and further Air Force squadrons to the response and retaliation on Gaza, and then likely they may start firing rockets and perhaps even a cross-border incursion as well. That's a real fear. So the IDF is on heightened alert both in northern Israel and also in the West Bank, which, as all of us know, has been escalating in violence and conflict between Israelis and Palestinians now for the better part of the past year and a half. So yes, my fear is that is only the beginning of a deadly conflict in this part of the world.
Benjamin Netanyahu responded by saying, "We are at war and we will win." What do you make of his rhetoric and his tone at this moment?
Well, the rhetoric isn't surprising because the failure here by the Israeli military is also on him and his government, because he is the one actually responsible for the military intelligence security forces. So yes, he's talking tough. It took him several hours, by the way, to actually issue that statement. For several hours, Israeli civilians and citizens had no real authority figure to actually explain what was going on, except for media reports and social media reports. And yes, I fully expect the prime minister and his government and his cabinet to order the Israeli military to retaliate in a very strong way against Hamas in Gaza. And by the way, as mentioned earlier, not just via airstrikes, as we've seen now in recent years, but my fear, again, is a major ground operation by the Israeli military deep into Gaza.
On that final point where you're talking about the response and information, are we seeing any misinformation spread? I mean, how are people accessing factual, accurate news right now?
Well, there's the official reports, which I'd argue are undercounting, purposely undercounting both the casualties on the Israeli side and the hostages and captives that have been taken from Israeli territory into Gaza. I believe that's due to the continuing ongoing operations in southern Israel, and also not to completely freak out the public. My fear, again, is that once the fog of war clears, that the numbers, both in terms of Israeli casualties in southern Israel and hostages taken, will be much greater than the Israeli public realizes at this moment.
Thank you so much for joining us, Neri Zilber, at this really worrying time and bringing your perspective. Thank you so much. Let's remind you then of our breaking news. The Palestinian militant group Hamas has launched an unprecedented surprise attack on Israel. Let's bring you a quick rundown of the key images from the last few hours. First of all, the rockets. Here you see the rockets being fired from Gaza into Israel, streaking across the sky. Several thousand were launched early on Saturday at Tel Aviv and also other towns in the south of Israel. And let's show you the damage that the rockets have caused. Buildings set on fire here in Ashkelon. The emergency services in Israel say 22 people have been killed, hundreds more have been injured. Palestinian gunmen have also managed to cross into Israel itself. They've taken advantage of the chaos. These pictures have been supplied by Hamas and they appear to show breaches in the barrier. We're also hearing of Israeli tanks and personnel being captured in Gaza. These pictures appear to show a captured tank being clambered over by Palestinians. Live to Tel Aviv, we can speak to Yuri Dromi, who is the founder and head of the Jerusalem Press Club. Previously, he was the spokesperson of the Rabin and Peres governments and is also a retired colonel, having served in the Israeli Air Force. Thank you so much for joining us. Your response to what is happening right now?
Well, I was woken up 6:30 this morning by a siren, and immediately I thought about the analogy to the way I was woken up 50 years ago by the Yom Kippur War. And already the analogy to the Yom Kippur War was mentioned before by Jeremy and Neri. And I think people forget that, yes, and both in 1973 and today, we were taken by surprise. But what happened later was that Israel won the war big time. And I think the Hamas really miscalculated this time, because I think they expected the Hezbollah to join in, or maybe the Iranians. And up till now, they were wrong. And now they invoke the wrath of the Israeli IDF. And as much as I'm always for political solutions to these kind of problems, I think now there's no way back but to really pound Hamas and make it regret for this kind of aggression.
Well, we are seeing that happening at the moment in terms of the live pictures that we have in retaliatory airstrikes on Gaza at the moment. But it is your fear, is it, that this will turn into a multi-front war, that we could see other parties involved, including Hezbollah?
Yeah, I'm not so afraid of it because I think if it has been a concentrated attack, Hezbollah would have joined before. And since it hasn't, my assessment is that Nasrallah is still licking the wounds of his miscalculation back in 2006. And therefore, I think the Hamas took a huge gamble here, which will cost them a lot. I don't think, I hope, but I don't also think that it will escalate into the multi-front war, which probably the Hamas leaders hoped for.
Yuri, this is being seen, as you know, as a massive failure of Israeli intelligence, the sheer scale and complexity of this. How did they allow this to happen? What went wrong? And if you could speak from your experience, of course, as a retired colonel.
I think all went wrong. First of all, we had some signs or signals before, because the jihad was doing some kind of exercise, and this is exactly the same thing that the Egyptians were doing before the Yom Kippur War. But I think we were fallen asleep and thinking that, there's a rhetoric, there's a militant rhetoric here, and there's all kind of bravado things. And probably were a bit arrogant about it. But this is not the time to learn the lessons. I mean, we need to really discuss it later. Right now, the job at hand is to, first of all, make sure all the terrorists who invaded Israel are killed or expelled, and later make Hamas pay for its aggression. And only then the time will come to really learn the lessons.
So as we see these live pictures and airstrikes happening in Gaza, are you also expecting that there will be a big ground operation as well into Gaza?
Israel has been reluctant to launch ground operations in the last rounds and kind of limited itself to airstrikes. I think there will be no other way than to go there and really get Mohammed Deif, the head of the military branch of the Hamas, and the others, make them personally pay for their aggression, and also maybe set such a blow to the Hamas that it will take some years before it thinks again about this kind of operation. And maybe there will be some change in Gaza itself. I'm scaling my expectation, but I think there will be no way of punishing the Hamas for its aggression unless we go there by some foot soldiers.
We are getting some reaction in from around the world. The Russians are calling for an immediate ceasefire. That's just happened in the past minute or so. What are your expectations of the rest of the world at the moment?
First of all, I would welcome a Russian call for ceasefire in Ukraine before they intervene in what's going on here. The rest of the world usually gives us some grace period, but it's always short. And then suddenly the Hamas and the Gaza people are becoming the victims. It's all over again. I hope the world will understand that this time it's different. It's a game changer, and Israel cannot limit itself to the kind of retaliations that it has done in the past. I mean, this time is serious.
Yeah, but what would you say to many?
Lucy, they brought it on themselves.
Yeah, but what would you say to the many Palestinians who would say the game changer has been years of occupation? The way that their lives in the West Bank and Gaza are controlled by Israel, the fact that they have essentially, Netanyahu's government, abandoned the peace process, that if you live in Gaza as a young man, it's like being in an open-air prison. They feel this was their only option, militancy.
Well, that's, again, making us like the aggressors and the responsible for all the miseries. We pulled out of Gaza, let me remind you. We pulled out of Gaza in 2005, and the people of Gaza elected Hamas as their government. And Hamas, during the years, got a lot of support from, indirect support from Israel, like cement, like this and that, and they funneled it always to military actions instead of nation building in Gaza. So yes,
nation building in Gaza is difficult when there's still settlement activity happening by the Israelis. There's been no halt to the settlements.
I think that once the people of Gaza elect somebody else, except for Hamas, which is sworn to the destruction of Israel, rather than building a future for the people of Gaza, then they can't blame Israel for this.
Do you approve then of this current government in Israel and how it has handled the relationship with the Palestinian Authority over the past few months, the fact that there really is no ongoing peace process at the moment?
I'm a strong opponent of this government, and I specifically in their approach to the Palestinian Authority, I think we should have done more, but this is not the time to discuss it. I mean, we are at war, we are attacked. As we speak, Palestinian or Hamas or Islamic Jihad terrorists are killing people in our cities in the south. So let's talk about the rest later.
The reason I raise it is I think that so many people want to not just look at the disease, but the symptoms, the cause of what has happened. Those questions are being asked today as people seek to understand, what is happening, and the scale and the monumental nature of today hasn't just come out of nowhere.
I'm a strong supporter of the two-state solution. I think between the Jordan River and the sea, there's enough space for both Palestinians and Israelis to live next to each other in peace and only to bring prosperity and good hope for the future of the young generation. But there is a Hamas in Gaza, there is Islamic Jihad in Gaza who don't share any of this dream. And this is what we have done. They've done to us this morning, and it's still going on as we speak. And therefore, first of all, we need to put an end to this immediate violence and then talk about the political solutions.
Uri, around you, the response today from Israelis, does it feel like there is a real sense of not only fear about what is happening today, but that this will go on for some time potentially?
It's not so much fear, it's a shock and surprise, but Israelis are good at these kind of crises, and suddenly the solidarity which has been shaken over the last few months through what the government calls judicial reform, what others call constitutional coup, has shattered this solidarity.
Uri, can I just briefly interrupt you, because Benjamin Netanyahu has just spoken and I want to get your response to this. He says Israel will reinforce frontiers to deter any others from making the mistake of joining this war. I mean, that's a clear message to Hezbollah, isn't it?
You find me unprecedentedly agreeing with my Prime Minister.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us with your perspectives. Thank you. As we continue to see actually those live pictures from Gaza of retaliatory action taking place by Israel. Let's look at them there to remind you the Palestinian militant group Hamas has launched an unprecedented attack on Israel. Using cover from a barrage of thousands of rockets, militants have actually infiltrated Israel. They used motorbikes, they used paragliders and boats. We think, although this is a little bit murky, this picture, but Israeli radio is saying that 35 Israeli soldiers have been kidnapped. We're looking into that a little bit more, that claim. But the emergency services in Israel saying at least 22 people have been killed. Israeli military vehicles have been attacked and some taken over the border into Gaza. And in this town of Sderot, gunmen have opened fire on residents. The number of people killed in Israel, injured in Israel, we know the death toll at the moment 22, but also the injuries are very, very high. 540 Israelis have been injured. But what you're seeing right now are Israeli forces carrying out retaliatory airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. To remind you, there we've seen Benjamin Netanyahu saying he will reinforce frontiers to deter any others from making the mistake of joining this war. Earlier he said his country was at war and that it would win. Hamas, for their part, saying their operation was a response to Israeli violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. And as we've been discussing, an investigation is now underway into why the country's intelligence services, the Israeli intelligence services, failed to see this attack coming. Let's go back to Tel Aviv. We can speak to Alison Kaplan-Sommer, who is a journalist at Israeli newspaper and website Haaretz. Very good to see you, Alison. Can I just use you for a moment as a journalist on a breaking, developing story? What are you hearing from southern Israel, particularly about what is happening there at the moment?
Southern Israel, and you have to remember that southern Israel is no stranger to difficult security situations. For decades, they've faced rocket fire and are used to this. This is something that they have never seen before. Southern Israel is in shock, in panic, in distress. And I think that their biggest issue right now is that there doesn't seem to be anyone out there to help them. Hours after terrorists infiltrated towns, cities, kibbutz communities, people are locked in their homes, in their shelters, hearing fire outside. And there's been nobody there to help them. There is still, I believe, up to 10 places in southern Israel where there is active, ongoing infiltration, and they're trapped in their homes, and there has not been a sufficient responsive help from these Israeli security forces that everyone essentially in Israel, trusts and depends on for their defense. So I think there's a physical security crisis, and I think there's also a massive crisis of confidence in the leadership of this country.
What are you hearing, Alison, about the capture of these Israeli soldiers? We've just had a claim from Hamas that they are responsible for this, but also in the past few minutes, Islamic Jihad also saying its fighters have captured many Israeli soldiers. What is being said on Israeli state media?
Well, the state media for now is being as murky as possible. You have to remember their audience, right, is the fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, sons, and daughters of the soldiers. So they have to be very careful with information that they do not have 100% verified. So the official sources here are very sparse in the information they're getting. And unfortunately, that means that rumors fly and that we have to depend on the other side, on the kidnappers, for the information. So everyone's being very cautious about it. But Israel, as you recall, gets up in arms when there is one captured soldier, when one soldier is being held hostage. So the idea, the prospect of having 35 hostages, Israeli hostages inside Gaza, is going to be a diplomatic security crisis, I think, on the scale of, over the scale of anything that Israel's ever seen before.
And Alison, we're reporting at the moment, is this figure the same for you in Israel? 22 people have died, but it's a huge number of people injured too, 545. That must be putting some of the healthcare systems under real pressure.
Yeah, there's a nationwide call for blood donations, especially type O, that there is an overwhelming number of injured people in the hospital, particularly in the Soroka hospital in Beersheba. And so everyone's being called on to give blood if they can.
And Alison, just finally, what have your friends and neighbours and family expressed to you today? I mean, you've talked about the fears for what will happen over the coming days, but are people today trying to stay safe, going into shelters?
Well, people who are not in the immediate area are not in shelters. Everyone's being told to stay by shelters, to stay near shelters. But what I said before about the crisis of confidence, we've had 9 months now of demonstrations in the streets against this government on what they've been trying to do domestically. But everyone's saying, well, they're still keeping us safe and they're still protecting us. Now there's a crisis of confidence on the outside front, on the security front. So I think it's going to double the pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu, double the skepticism on whether he can continue to lead this country and whether people have faith in him. And just on one, larger global note, Netanyahu has been trying to distract from the domestic crisis with the prospect of normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. This would be a huge triumph for him. It would basically avoid the situation of the Palestinians and lead Israel towards greater peace with the Arab world. It really could be that what we're seeing now is the result of Iran operating its proxies in the region, trying to undermine this progress and trying to cheat Israel of this goal and this progress, and instead lead it into what we're seeing is going to be a very all-out, very devastating, very bloody war. And I think the people that I fear for as much or more as the Israelis who are harmed in this is going to be the Palestinian civilian population, which will be devastated by the Israeli retaliation. But it's really no choice.
I have to leave it with you there, Alison, but thank you so much. And do stay with us here on BBC News for continuing coverage from the Middle East.
Hello, the weekend has started with some massive weather contrasts. Two weather watcher shots from earlier on really sums up those contrasts. Across the south here, you can see here in Dorset, blue skies overhead. It's going to be a pretty warm day for October, whereas further north, this was the view in Glasgow, where the rain has been relentless since yesterday evening. This is the cloud that's producing the rain. It's been fed by some warm, moist air coming up from Iberia, but also clashing with some colder air coming down from the north. And that's really given the weather front a bit of oomph. And it's why the Met Office have an amber weather warning in place for heavy rain across these areas of Scotland. There's already been lots of travel disruption, flooding, more to come, potential further disruption and landslips as well. Brighter colours just focusing on that area where the heaviest of the rain is into the start of the afternoon. Extensive rain across the rest of Scotland, or the far north. Orkney, Shetland should stay dry, not too bad in the Hebrides either, and turning a little bit dry in the far south later. But for Northern Ireland, England and Wales, well, compared to the 9 to 13 Celsius, we've got some spells of hazy sunshine, limited a bit by low cloud around the coast in the west. But we could see temperatures 7-8 degrees above normal, 24 or 25 degrees in southeast England. Now into this evening and overnight, those areas under the amber weather warning still seeing some further rain, but it does ease its way northwards. Some of the worst of the conditions as we're heading towards tomorrow morning. Most other areas stay dry. With some lighter winds to the southwest, we'll see some mist and fog patches. Temperatures for most though staying at around 8 to 14 degrees. So here's the weather chart for Sunday. Our weather front is still there, still drawing in the warmer air from the south on that western edge of an area of high pressure. But that rain is going to be most relentless across the north of Scotland through tomorrow. Does mean central southern Scotland a drier, slightly brighter day, but there'll still be a few showers around. Maybe the odd one for Northern Ireland, Northern England, but much of Northern Ireland, England and Wales staying dry. Bit more cloudy, especially in eastern areas, but with the sunshine at its strongest across the south, we'll see temperatures again into the mid-20s. Not as cold a day for Scotland. Now, as you go through into next week, high pressure in the south keeps things dry, warm for a time, but a passing air of low pressure midweek will throw rain southwards and eastwards. It's going to be quite windy across the north through the first half of next week. Quite chilly in the breeze towards the end, but further south, the warmth continues for a few days yet. That being cleared away from Wednesday onwards. Take care.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Israel's Prime Minister says his country is at war after an unprecedented attack by the Palestinian militant group Hamas.
Citizens of Israel, we are at war. Not an operation, not an escalation, a war. The enemy will pay an unprecedented price.
Thousands of rockets are launched from the Gaza Strip. Emergency services say at least 22 Israelis have been killed. 2 Palestinians are reported dead. Israeli forces are right now carrying out retaliatory airstrikes on Gaza. The US is calling on both sides to show restraint. Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings. Welcome to BBC News. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the country is at war and will win after a surprise attack by the Palestinian militant group Hamas saw thousands of rockets launched into Israel from Gaza. Dozens of militants appear to have entered southern Israel. Let's take you through what we know so far. The rocket attacks have struck Tel Aviv and surrounding areas of Gaza, the town of Ashkelon, seeing several major explosions. Israeli officials say at least 22 Israelis have been killed. 545 have been injured. Details of the Palestinian incursions are unclear, but gunmen have been reported in towns near the Gaza border and Israelis have been warned to stay inside. There are also reports of a number of Israeli soldiers taken captive by fighters. Hamas's military commander, Mohammed Deif, has announced the start of the operation in a broadcast on Hamas media, calling on Palestinians everywhere to fight. Israel's military has been striking targets in Gaza in response. At least 2 Palestinians, as I've mentioned, confirmed dead so far. Well, let's bring you more now from that statement made by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, addressing the nation in a video statement released on social channels.
Citizens of Israel, we are at war, not an operation, not an escalation, a war. This morning, Hamas launched a murderous surprise attack against the state of Israel and its citizens. We've been at it since early morning. I convened the heads of the security service. First of all, I instructed to cleanse the settlements of the terrorists who had infiltrated. This operation is being carried out during these hours. At the same time, I ordered an extensive reserve mobilization and a retaliatory war with a strength and scope that the enemy had never known. The enemy will pay an unprecedented price. In the meantime, I call on all citizens of Israel to strictly obey the instructions of the army and the instructions of the Home Command. We are in a war and we win it.
Let's just bring you an update that we are getting from Gaza, as we can see some live pictures still of retaliatory airstrikes being sent into the Gaza Strip from Israel. Here is the live pictures for you right now. What we're hearing from AFP news agency, 9 people have been killed in Gaza as this conflict escalates. We have also been hearing from the Palestinian president. Now, remember, he does not speak for Hamas. Hamas controls Gaza, but Mahmoud Abbas from the West Bank has said the Palestinian people have the right to defend themselves against what he calls the terror of settlers and occupation troops. That coming from Mahmoud Abbas. We have some pictures as well. We're keeping you right up to date with everything we're getting in here at the BBC and developments on the ground. We've just received these pictures. This is a bulldozer destroying the border fence between Israel and Gaza. Palestinians are chanting and pouring through. Gunmen are reported to have opened fire on residents in Sderot. That is an of Israeli military vehicles attacked on the Israeli side too. Some of those have been taken back. It does appear to show Hamas militants, young men, celebrating and posing for pictures on what it said to be an Israeli army tank. I think we can see here that the footage shows what appears to also be this Israeli military vehicle, also captured by the militants. Lots of international reaction coming in as well to these developments. The UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying he is shocked by this morning's attacks by Hamas terrorists against Israeli citizens. Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. President Macron in France says, I strongly condemn the terrorist attacks which are currently hitting Israel. I express my full solidarity with the victims, their families and those close to them. Very important as well to bring you the US reaction, condemning the violence and urging both sides to refrain from retaliating. Egypt as well. You might know that Egypt often mediates between Israel and Palestinian militants. Egypt, Cairo, also calling for restraint and warning, as many people are today, of dire consequences. We have a correspondent, a reporter in Gaza who we've managed to get through to, Rushdie Abu Alouf. I spoke to him a short time ago for an update.
Yeah, I can see a huge black smoke coming out of the building, just being hit by Israeli airstrike. Israel started to respond to thousands of rockets fired by the militant group Hamas since like 6:30 in the morning, with a surprise organized attack by, as Hamas said, by sea, land and air. We have getting reports of Hamas militants infiltrated into the Israeli territories, captured, as they claim, one of Israeli military posts, and kidnapped some of the soldiers from this location. The latest figure from Palestinian Health Ministry official, he said about 25 people so far killed since the morning. Some of the Israeli airstrikes were targeting the border area where Hamas militants are believed to be infiltrated inside. Israel is trying to secure the big gap that Hamas cut in the fence and started the attack from there. People here in Gaza are starting to feel the war. And always people, civilians in both sides, are paying the price of this unstoppable conflict. People live 4 wars and few battles in between, but I don't think they have ever been in this worry since 17 years, because they believe that what Hamas has done today is significant escalation and will bring significant response from Israel, where 2.3 million people live in a very poor, tiny, highly populated area.
On that, Rushdie, we are seeing these airstrikes in Gaza right now, thousands of people in this very small, as you said, densely populated area. Is it possible for people to go to anywhere that feels more safe?
Well, in Gaza, there is no shelter system or even siren system or warning system. People since early in the morning stay indoors. Well, Saturday is a normal working day. By the time Hamas fired the rocket, but thousands of students were going to school, and some of them were stuck in the school. Quickly, Hamas announced that there is no school, no university. As I'm talking, I'm looking over the center. It's been deserted since the morning. Most of the shops are closed. Only few bakeries and some supermarkets, and we have seen people queuing